It was getting ready for bed when the old phone beside my lamp rang, the same phone that had stayed silent for almost a decade. My hand froze. No one had that number anymore. When I answered, the line crackled like breathing in the dark. Then a young woman's voice whispered, "Mom, it's me." My chest tightened. My daughter had been dead for 10 years. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and stay until the end. What happened next still chills me. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, even though the line had already gone dead. My breath felt trapped inside my chest, as if speaking or moving would break something fragile in the air around me. The house was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, each second reminding me that what I heard was real, not a dream, not a mistake. I stared at the old phone, the same one that sat on my daughter's bedside table when she was alive, the same phone she used to call me every night at 9 p.m. sharp, the same phone that hadn't rung in 10 years, until tonight. I tried to convince myself that I had misheard, that grief had found a new way to trick me, but then I replayed the voice in my mind. Clear, warm, familiar. "Hi, Mom." It wasn't a stranger copying a tone. It wasn't some recording. It was her exact voice, her exact softness, even the little breathy pause she always made before speaking. My hands were trembling so hard I had to set the phone down on the table. When I touched my face, my cheeks were wet. I hadn't even realized I was crying. My daughter Claire had been gone for 10 years. 10 long, bitter years. I buried her myself. I cleaned her room myself. I kept her clothes, her books, the tiny painting she made at age 7. I kept every piece of her because letting go felt like losing her again. And now, after all these years of silence, the one thing I didn't expect to come back was her voice, especially not at midnight. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door, half expecting her to walk in. I whispered her name, hesitant, afraid that saying it too loudly would make the moment vanish. My heart felt tight. Fear, shock, confusion all fighting inside me, and underneath it all, something heavier. A question I didn't want to ask myself. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if this was a warning? I picked up the phone again, checking if the number had shown on the screen. Nothing. No caller ID. The way it looked when Claire used to call from payphones after her night shifts at the diner. Back then, I always knew it was her. Tonight, I felt the same strange certainty. It was her voice. It was her tone. It was her secrets. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The moment I closed my eyes, I heard the crackle of the phone again, the whisper of her breath, and then that soft, familiar greeting I kept replaying 10 years of memories. The way she laughed, the way she held my hand when she was scared, the way she said "Ma" instead of "Mom." The voice on the phone had said "Mom" first, but then corrected itself, almost hesitating, as if remembering, like Claire always did when she felt guilty or nervous. As the night went on, things started to feel different around the house. Not strange in a ghostly way, strange in a human way, like someone had been moving around without my knowledge. A picture frame was slightly turned. A drawer that I knew I had closed was now cracked open. The hall light, which I rarely touched, flickered once and went out. By morning, I felt sick with unease. The moment the sun rose, I walked to Claire's old room. I hadn't opened that door in years, not since the 3rd anniversary of her death. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. The air inside the room felt colder than the rest of the house. Dust floated in the beams of sunlight. Her dresses still hung neatly in the wardrobe. Her favorite perfume still sat on the table. Everything was how I had left it, but something felt wrong. The phone inside the room, the one that used to sit on her bedside table, was gone. I checked every shelf, every drawer, every corner of the room. Nothing. The cord lay on the floor, unplugged. The receiver was missing. My heart dropped. Someone had been in this room. Someone had touched the phone. Someone had taken it. I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame so hard my knuckles turned white. Suddenly, the midnight call made more sense. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't Claire reaching from beyond. This was a person, a real person, a living person who somehow knew everything about my daughter, even things only Claire and I had shared. But who and why? The fear that had been sitting in my chest now twisted into something darker, suspicion. Only one other person in this house knew the layout well enough to find that old phone. Only one other person had reason to go into her room. Only one other person had access to things I kept hidden. The thought made me nauseous. My own son, the only child I had left. He had been acting strange lately, avoiding eye contact, staying out late, making hushed phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. He had grown impatient with me, snapping at small things, pushing me away. And now this. I walked back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and waited for him to wake up. My mind replayed the call, the missing phone, the things only Claire should know. A terrible thought took root. What if the call was not meant to scare me? What if it was meant to warn me? As the house slowly stirred to life, I realized one thing clearly. Someone was using my daughter's voice. Someone wanted something from me, and I needed to find out what, before it was too late. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the phone beside me, the same phone that had echoed with a voice I should never have heard again. My son walked in half awake, rubbing his eyes, asking why I looked tired. I told him about the call, every detail, the tone, the words, the strange calm of the voice that felt like it reached through 10 years of silence. He didn't take a second to think. He gave a short, uncomfortable smile, the kind people give when they want a story to go away. He said it must have been a scam, maybe a glitch, maybe a recording. His smile didn't match his eyes. His eyes were too alert, too calculating, almost like he knew something already and wanted to hide it under that soft expression. He grabbed the phone from the table, looked at it quickly, and placed it back as if it was something harmless. He told me not to worry, not to think too much, not to let old memories take over. But behind his words, behind that forced smile, I saw something else. Fear. Not loud fear, not dramatic fear, but quiet fear. The kind that makes a man pretend everything is normal when it is not. I watched the corners of his mouth, the way they tightened each time I mentioned specific things the voice had said, things only Claire knew. When I said the voice used the name of our old dog, his smile flickered. When I said the voice hummed the old lullaby I used to sing, he blinked too fast. When I mentioned the way she called me Ma, not Mom, the smile slipped completely for a second. He looked down at his hands, then plastered the smile back on his face, as if he was gluing it there. I had known him since he was born. I had watched him lie before, little lies, harmless lies. But this wasn't that. This was a grown man trying to hold a door shut while something inside pushed back. He reached across the table and touched my hand, trying to appear calm and reassuring, but the warmth wasn't there. His hand felt stiff. His thumb kept tapping nervously. He told me again that it must be spam and that the world was full of strange calls and tricks these days. But his voice trembled slightly, not enough for a stranger to notice, but enough for a mother to hear. A mother knows when her child is lying, even if he hides it well. His smile had changed. It wasn't soft anymore. It was practiced, thin, stretched across his face like a mask. I watched him pour his coffee. His hand shook when he picked up the mug. He tried to hide it by turning away from me. That told me more than his words ever could. Something about that call had frightened him. And it wasn't because of grief or memories. It was because the voice had said something he didn't want, repeated. Something he didn't want, exposed. As he walked around the kitchen, pretending everything was normal, I studied him the way a mother studies her child on the first day he comes home silent from school, the way you look for bruises that aren't on the skin. His breathing was too fast. His shoulders were too high. He kept glancing at the phone like it might ring again and ruin him. That smile he wore, it wasn't for me. It was to protect himself. He finally said he had to leave for work. He kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong, but the warmth was missing again. The moment he stepped outside, the smile vanished completely, and his face turned heavy, tense, troubled. He walked faster than usual, almost like he was running from something. I watched from the window as he sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, staring ahead for a long time before driving off. I knew then. The call didn't scare me. His reaction did. When I returned to the table, I looked at the phone. His fingerprints were on it. He had held it too tightly. He had checked something too quickly, and his smile, that cold, hollow smile, stayed in my mind. It wasn't a smile of reassurance. It was a smile of someone who knew more than he should, a smile of someone trying to hide guilt behind politeness. That was the moment I realized the truth. The call wasn't haunting me. It was haunting him. His fear was the proof. His forced calm was the clue. His cold smile was the confession he didn't speak out loud. And I knew my daughter's voice, wherever it came from, wasn't reaching out to hurt me. It was reaching out to warn me. When my son dismissed the call as a scam, I tried to pretend I believed him. But after he left the house, I walked into Claire's old room, the room I had not stepped into for more than 5 years. The moment I opened the door, the air felt different, still warm with a trace of her perfume, the same soft rose scent she used to wear on special occasions. I stood quietly in the doorway, letting the memories roll over me like waves I couldn't stop. It hurt, but it also reminded me of the love that used to fill this house before grief took everything from me. Claire had been my only daughter, my bright, talkative child who loved old movies, warm socks, and writing poems she never let anyone read. When she was little, she used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, whispering, "Ma, the thunder is loud. Can I stay?" I always held her close and told her, "You're safe as long as you're with me." That memory stabbed at my chest now, because I couldn't keep her safe the night she died. No mother ever stops carrying that guilt, even when everyone says, "It wasn't your fault." Some words don't reach the places where grief lives. After the accident, the police told me she went instantly. They thought that would comfort me, but all I could think about was her last few seconds. Was she scared? Was she in pain? Was she thinking of me? Those questions stayed like stones in my heart for years, and this room, her room, became the only place where I could breathe without collapsing. Every morning after she died, I'd open the curtains, let the sunlight in, and whisper, "Good morning, baby," as if she were still there. It was the only thing that kept me from falling apart completely. Her dresses still hang in the wardrobe. The blue one she wore on her graduation day, the yellow summer dress she loved because she said it made her feel bright, and the simple white blouse she wore the last time I saw her. I could never bring myself to fold them away. Her shoes are lined neatly by the bed, just as she left them. Even her favorite hairbrush sits on the dresser, the wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. I dusted it for years, unable to move it from its spot. In the corner sits the little table where she kept her writing notebooks. She used to scribble ideas for stories, lists of things she wanted to do, places she wanted to travel. I never opened the notebooks. They felt too sacred, a doorway into her thoughts that I wasn't brave enough to enter. I thought if I left them untouched, she'd somehow stay close silly, maybe. But grief makes you hold on to strange things. And then there was the phone. The same old landline phone she insisted on keeping when everyone else switched to mobile phones. "I like the sound of the ring," she used to say, laughing. After she passed, I placed that phone on my bedside table because hearing it gave me comfort. It reminded me of nights she used to call me from work, saying, "Ma, I'm coming home late, leave the porch light on." I kept the phone plugged in, even though no one had called it for almost 10 years. I never expected it to ring, certainly not with her voice on the other end. I sat on her bed now, feeling the worn quilt she stitched when she was 16. Little blue and white pieces sewn together unevenly because she kept pricking her fingers and losing patience. She said it was ugly, but I loved it because it was hers. Every time I touched it, I felt her childish frustration and her stubborn smile. All these memories lived in this room like trapped sunlight, soft, warm, and painful, all at once. After she died, People kept telling me to move on. But how do you move on from the child you carried? How do you let go of the person who shared your laughter, your worries, your dreams? I didn't want to move on. I wanted to remember every detail. The sound of her footsteps, the way she tied her hair, the way she always hugged me twice before leaving the house. So I kept the room exactly the same. Every corner of it holds a piece of her life and a piece of my heart. And as I sat there, staring at the dust floating quietly in the afternoon light, the sound of her voice from the night before replayed in my head. Hi, Mom. Not Mom, not Mother, not Ma'am, M.A. The exact way only Claire ever said it. It wasn't just a memory, it was a message. And now, sitting in her room surrounded by the pieces of her life, I felt something deep inside me shift. Something that whispered that whatever was happening wasn't random, wasn't imaginary, and absolutely wasn't a scam. Something was coming, something Claire was trying to tell me, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my bones, that the real story hadn't even started yet. What happened after that first week did not feel supernatural. It felt personal, like someone inside the house wanted me to question my own memory. It began with tiny changes, small enough to brush off, but repeated enough that I could no longer ignore them. Each night, after everyone went to bed, I would sit in my chair by the hallway, pretending to read, but keeping one ear open. The air in the house changed. It became heavier, quieter, as if someone else was awake besides me. At first, it was the phone, her old phone. Lying face down on the desk in her room, I always kept it wrapped in a cloth, inside the drawer. But one morning, the drawer was open, and the phone was on top of the desk, screen smudged, as if a hand had touched it recently. I told myself I must have forgotten to put it away properly, but that explanation didn't calm me. The next night, around 2 a.m, I heard soft humming coming from her room. It was the same lullaby I used to sing to her when she was a child. The exact tune, the exact slow rhythm. My body froze. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak under me. When I finally gathered the courage to walk to the room, the humming stopped instantly, like someone had been listening for my footsteps. I opened the door slowly, expecting to see something, anything, but the room was still and untouched, except for the faint smell of her perfume drifting through the air, a scent I hadn't smelled in years. It almost knocked the breath out of me. Every morning after that, something else felt different. Her old stuffed toy, the one she kept on her pillow since childhood, moved positions, sometimes sitting upright, sometimes lying near the foot of the bed, once even placed on the floor facing the door, as if someone had put it there intentionally. Her closet door, always kept shut, would be open by an inch. The curtains would be parted, although I remembered clearly closing them before going to sleep. I began checking the locks around the house, wondering if someone else had been entering without my knowledge. But nothing was broken, nothing was forced. It was like the house itself was shifting when the lights went out. Then came the nights when the phone calls returned. Always the same. No caller ID. Always at the same time. Never a minute early or late. Sometimes I didn't answer, but the phone would keep ringing, long and persistent, until I picked up. When I did, the other end was silent except for breathing, slow and soft, like someone trying not to cry. My hands shook every time I heard it. I told myself to hang up, but something in that breathing held me there. Something too familiar, too close to my heart. One night, I heard a faint tapping sound through the phone. 3 slow taps. It was the same pattern my daughter used when she was young, tapping on my bedroom door to see if I was awake. It was something no one else knew, not even her brother. By the 3rd week, the house no longer felt like the place I had lived in for decades. Shadows seemed longer. The hallways echoed differently. The silence between each strange moment felt louder than any sound. I began to sleep with the lights on, something I hadn't done since childhood. I checked her room 3 or 4 times a day, looking for answers I never found. Sometimes I stood in the doorway, staring at the bed, feeling like someone had just been sitting on it. Once, I even saw a small handprint on the dust near the headboard, too small to belong to an adult, but shaped exactly like hers when she was young. People say grief changes the mind, but I knew grief. I lived with grief for 10 years. This was not grief. This was something else, something that wanted me to notice, something that wanted to be known. The small changes were not random. They were messages, warnings, clues guiding me towards something I did not yet understand. And with each passing night, the pieces started fitting together in a way that made my stomach twist. Something was building, growing, preparing. Something inside that room was waiting for me to finally see the whole truth. I waited until the house was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound loud. My son had left for work, or at least that's what he told me. I kept thinking about Claire's diary lying open on that desk, turned to a page that I had never seen before, with that one sentence, "Don't let him take it." Her handwriting, her words. 10 years after she died. My fingers trembled as I walked down the hallway, the familiar ache in my chest returning, the one that always hit me when I remembered her last day. That room had been frozen in time, untouched, sacred. Now it felt disturbed, as if someone had walked through her memory with dirty shoes. I turned the doorknob slowly. The room smelled like lavender and old paper, like it always had. But something was different. The window was slightly open, letting in a cold breeze that made the curtains sway gently. Her jewelry box was pulled forward. The books on her shelf weren't in their usual order, and her favorite scarf, the one she wore every winter, was missing entirely. I felt a coldness settle in my stomach, not fear, but a sinking grief mixed with suspicion. I went to the bed where I had seen my son sitting earlier. The blanket had been moved. There, right under the mattress corner, I saw a corner of a document peeking out. My breathing slowed as I lifted it. Then another paper. Then another. One by one, I pulled out envelopes, folders, copies of signatures. Some pages were old, browned at the edges. Real others looked fresh, crisp, printed recently. The name, Claire Harrison, appeared again and again. My daughter's name, her signature, her trust account, her insurance, her property transfer papers. My knees almost gave out when I saw a page dated just last month. My dead daughter's signature, fresh ink, perfectly forged. Someone had been planning this for a while, carefully, quietly, confidently enough to think I would never notice. And that someone was the only person who had full access to this house besides me, my son, my only living child. The thought sliced through me so sharply that I had to sit down. I remembered how he avoided conversations when I brought up Claire, how he said he didn't want old things left lying around, how he pushed me to update papers, how he insisted he should help manage my finances. Like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place, each memory made the truth clearer and heavier. I found another document tucked behind her old sketchbook. This one wasn't forged. It was a genuine letter from the insurance company, stating the remainder of Claire's trust balance, untouched for years, waiting for the beneficiary. Me, not him. Me. Because Claire trusted me more than anyone. The moment I read that, my heart began to race. I realized why the phone calls had started. Whoever was pretending to be Claire wasn't haunting me. They were warning me. Someone wanted me awake. Someone wanted me alert. And someone didn't want my son to get away with what he was doing. I opened the wardrobe next. Behind her dresses, hidden in a shoebox, I found even more documents, receipts showing attempts to access accounts, letters addressed to banks requesting transfer approvals. Notes written in my son's handwriting, with Claire's signature scribbled repeatedly beneath practice attempts. Failed copies, near-perfect ones. My entire body felt cold. He had been preparing to steal from his dead sister. He had been preparing to lie to me, and he had been preparing to take what she spent her life building. A noise startled me. The floorboard creaked outside the room. I froze, clutching the papers to my chest, but no one appeared. The hallway remained empty. Even so, I acted quickly. I gathered every single document I had found, stacked them neatly, and placed them into a large envelope. I felt anger, grief, betrayal, all tangled together. But beneath all that, something else began to grow, resolve, a calm, focused determination. Someone had crossed a line, and I was no longer the mother who looked away, who stayed silent, who ignored warning signs. I glanced at the phone sitting on her bedside table, the same phone that had rung at midnight, the same phone that carried a voice reminding me of the daughter I had lost. I placed my hand gently on top of it and whispered, "I hear you, Claire. I hear you now." Because deep down, I knew she was right. Someone was trying to take what belonged to her. Someone she never trusted. Someone who forgot that even the dead can protect the living. And I wasn't going to let it happen. After finding those documents hidden under Claire's blankets, the deeds, the forged signatures, the insurance papers he had no right to touch, I felt something inside me collapse and harden at the same time. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was violation, a violation not only of my daughter's memory, but of the trust I had placed blindly, lovingly, foolishly in the child I had raised. My legs felt weak, so I sat on her bed, the same bed where she used to read her books, braid her hair, and laugh at silly jokes. Now that same bed held the proof of something dark, something shameful. I picked up the phone blindly, my hands trembling, and dialed the only number I could trust. Martha answered on the second ring. She had worked at the bank for nearly 30 years and had known Claire since she was a little girl with missing front teeth. Her voice was gentle at first, but when she heard the tremor in mine, she became alert. I told her everything: the phone calls, the whispers, the diary page, the missing items, and finally, the documents with Claire's forged name. I spoke slowly, each word feeling like glass in my throat. Martha listened without interrupting, letting the weight of my fears rest fully between us. When I finished, she exhaled sharply, not in surprise, but in grief. "Bring me what you found," she said quietly. "Right now. Don't wait." I wrapped the documents in a towel and drove to her house. It was late afternoon, but the sky felt heavier than usual, as if holding its breath. When I arrived, she ushered me in, closed the curtains, and spread the papers across her dining table. She examined each one with slow, careful fingers, looking at signatures, dates, notary stamps, all the details I didn't understand but trusted her to recognize. Within minutes, I saw the change in her face. Something stiffened behind her eyes, something that looked like confirmation of my worst fear. "This is forgery," she said. "Your son submitted a request to access Claire's trust. He claimed you gave consent. He even tried to prove you were unfit to handle her estate." My breath caught. My son, the child I had fed, clothed, nursed through sickness, cried for, prayed for, had tried to steal from his dead sister. And worse, he had tried to paint me as weak, confused, incapable. I stared at the papers again, my chest tightening. The reality settled like a cold weight on my shoulders. The phone calls weren't haunting me. Claire wasn't trying to frighten me. She was warning me. She was protecting me. My daughter, even after death, had seen what I refused to see in life. Martha placed her hand over mine. "You need to act now. If he succeeds, you could lose everything: the trust, the property, even legal rights to her belongings." I nodded slowly. My hands were ice cold, but my mind felt strangely sharp, like the fog had finally lifted after months of confusion. I looked around Martha's living room, simple, warm, quiet, and wondered how my own home had become a place of shadows and lies. I thought of the phone ringing at night, the hum of Claire's favorite song, the diary page that felt like a cry for help. It all aligned now, perfectly, painfully. She had been reaching through memories, through her old belongings, through the phone line itself, to guide me toward the truth. Martha pulled out her laptop and began typing an official request for an internal bank investigation. She also drafted a legal notice addressed to my son, informing him that further action was being reviewed. Her fingers moved with purpose. Mine trembled as I held my teacup. I didn't recognize this version of my life. A life where my son was not a protector, but a threat. A life where my daughter's memory had become the light guiding me through betrayal. A life where justice had to rise, even if it meant exposing my own blood. When everything was ready, Martha printed the documents and handed them to me neatly in a folder. "You're not alone," she said. "And Claire is not gone. She's still watching." I swallowed hard. For the first time since the phone rang, I allowed myself to cry. Not out of fear, not even out of heartbreak, but out of a strange mixture of anger, relief, and gratitude. I stood up slowly, folded the documents under my arm, and headed toward the door with new strength. My daughter had reached across time to protect me. Now it was my turn to protect her. Her name, her memory, her legacy. As I stepped outside, the evening wind brushed against my face, gentle and familiar. It felt almost like a hand. A small, warm hand I once held crossing the street. I whispered into the air, "I hear you, Claire. I'm listening now." And I meant it. That evening, when my son returned home, I was already waiting for him in the living room. I had arranged everything neatly on the coffee table. The printed call logs, the recording device, the bank confirmation Martha sent me, and the forged documents I found under Claire's blankets. He walked in, cheerful at first, humming to himself, but the moment he saw the table, his smile disappeared. He looked confused, then nervous, then angry, all within seconds. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't even stand up. I simply pointed at the chair across from me and said, "Sit." He hesitated, maybe thinking he could bluff his way out like he always did, but the silence in the room was too heavy to ignore. When he finally sat, I pushed the first envelope toward him, the forged signature. His eyes flicked over it, and he swallowed hard, but tried to stay calm. "Mom, this isn't what you think," he said. His voice trembled slightly. I didn't answer. I simply reached for the small audio recorder and clicked play. Claire's favorite lullaby, the one I used to hum for her at bedtime, drifted through the speaker, followed by the same soft breathing I had heard through the phone the night of the first call. Then the voice, clear, calm, unmistakably my daughter's, whispered, "Don't let him take it." My son froze. His face went pale. His hands gripped the armrest. His throat tightened with fear he couldn't hide anymore. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He didn't even blink. When the recording ended, I leaned back in my chair and said quietly, "This voice has been calling me. You can explain that, or I can let the police explain it for you." He looked away, jaw clenched, breathing uneven. I could see the shame and panic wrestling inside him. Finally, he whispered, "Mom, please, listen." But I didn't let him finish. Instead, I opened the next file. The bank alert showing an attempted claim on Claire's trust under his name, his signature, his handwriting, his greed. "You tried to take what wasn't yours," I said. "What she worked for, what she left behind, what she trusted us with." He sank back into the chair, defeated. After a few long seconds, he covered his face with his hands and muttered. I was desperate. I didn't respond with sympathy. Desperation doesn't justify betrayal, not from your own son. "You know what's worse than stealing from your dead sister?" I asked. "Doing it while letting your mother think she was losing her mind." He winced. A tear ran down his cheek, but I didn't move to comfort him. Not this time. This hurt too deeply. "I'll give you two choices," I said firmly, laying out the final documents. 1. You confess everything to the lawyers tomorrow morning and step away from anything tied to Claire's trust. You sign whatever they need. You apologize and fix what you broke. He blinked, barely breathing. "Or," he whispered, "or I take every piece of evidence, the recordings, the forged documents, the bank records, the camera footage, and I hand them directly to the police." He stared at me, stunned. Maybe he expected the gentle mother who protected him from scraped knees and bullies. Maybe he thought age had softened me, but betrayal builds a different kind of strength, a calm, sharp strength. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't afraid I was done. completely done. For the first time in years, he seemed to realize who I really was. A mother who had loved two children equally, and who had just watched one try to claw money out of the memory of the other. He looked down at the table, tears falling silently. Then he nodded, slowly, weakly, defeated. "I'll confess," he whispered. I held his gaze to make sure he meant it. "Good," I said, "because if you don't, Claire will make sure the phone rings again." His eyes widened in fear, and for the first time since my daughter died, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not victory, but a strange justice that comes when the truth finally steps into the light. When morning came, the house felt heavier than ever before, as if the walls themselves knew what had happened the night before. I sat at the kitchen table, my palms flat against the cold wood, waiting for my son to come downstairs. He moved slowly, like a man carrying a truth he could not run from anymore. He did not look at me, not once. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, the way children look when they know they have done something unforgivable. I stayed silent. I wanted him to speak first. I needed to see whether there was even a trace of guilt left in him, or if he was going to continue pretending to be innocent. After a long moment, he sat across from me, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, I'm sorry, but apologies spoken after betrayal have a strange emptiness. They fill the room, but they do not warm it." I listened, but I did not let sympathy weaken me like before. He tried to explain everything. He said he was drowning in debt. He said things had gotten out of control. He said he never meant to hurt me, or Claire's memory, or the home I had built with both love and loss. But excuses are just words, and words do not erase forged documents, hidden plans, or 10 years of pretending he had moved on from his sister when he had really been hunting for a way to use her death. I looked at him carefully and said nothing. For the first time in his life, he felt the silence of a mother who finally had nothing left to give. The lawyers arrived later that day. They walked him through every consequence, every form, every legal boundary he had crossed. He did not fight. He signed what needed signing. He agreed to restore what he had taken. It wasn't easy for him. There were heavy fees, restrictions placed on his accounts, and investigations he could not avoid. I watched him struggle through each moment, but I didn't interfere. This time, he had to walk alone. This time, he had to understand that real pain isn't a punishment, it is a teacher. When it was done, he packed a small bag. Not many clothes, not many belongings, mostly guilt. That is what he carried with him as he stood at the doorway and looked back at me. There were tears in his eyes, but I didn't move toward him. I did not hold him. I did not comfort him the way I used to. He whispered, "I need to go away for a while. I need to fix myself." I nodded. No anger, no hatred, just a quiet acceptance that sometimes distance is the only medicine strong enough to cure a damaged conscience. He walked down the steps slowly, as if every step pushed more history off his shoulders, and then he was gone. The house felt different right after. Not lighter, not yet, just still. The air settled. The silence softened. I walked into Claire's room and opened the window. Fresh air rushed in, brushing against the curtains like a soft hello. Her diary was still on the bed. Her picture still smiled at me. I touched the frame carefully, whispering, "It's over now." The strange heaviness that had been sitting inside my chest for weeks began to loosen inch by inch. I called the bank and the lawyer to confirm everything one last time. Her trust was untouched now, safe. Her memory was clean, protected. No one would use her name again for selfishness or greed. I'd made sure of that. It felt like I had finally done what a mother is supposed to do, protect her child, even after death. Later that evening, I sat by the phone, the same old phone that had woken me up that strange night. It was silent now, no crackle, no whisper, no voice pretending to be Claire. And yet, I kept it plugged in, not because I expected a call, but because I understood something I hadn't understood before. Sometimes signs come to us in strange ways, ways that make no sense in the moment, but become clear when the truth finally steps into the light. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was something meant only for a mother's heart to understand. Whatever it was, it saved me. That night, I slept with the window open. The breeze felt warm, gentle, safe. For the first time in years, I felt like the house and my heart were breathing again. The house has been quiet for weeks now, quieter than it has been in years, and I finally understand why. The fear that once sat on my chest like a weight has lifted, replaced by something lighter, something close to peace. The phone hasn't rung at midnight again, and the strange whispers have stopped, but I still keep that old handset plugged in beside my bed. Not because I expect another call, but because a small part of me wants to honor the message I believe was meant for me. Every night, before I sleep, I look at it and whisper, "Thank you, Claire." It feels strange talking to an object, but grief makes habits out of love, and love makes rituals out of memories. Some days, I sit in her old room, running my hand along the lace covers she chose herself when she was 19. I still remember the day she brought them home, laughing because she'd found them on sale. Her perfume still lingers faintly in the air, not strong, not imagined, just a soft reminder that some scents don't fade with time. I think about all the small signs I ignored, all the unusual things that happened before the truth surfaced. I used to wonder if I was losing my mind, but now I know I was being guided, nudged, protected in ways I didn't understand then. Whether it was memory, instinct, or something more, I was not alone. My son hasn't returned yet. He writes sometimes, long, apologetic messages that sound like they come from a man who has been forced to look in the mirror for the first time in his life. I do not hate him. A mother rarely hates her child, no matter how deep the betrayal cuts. But trust is not something that grows quickly. It grows slowly, like a plant watered carefully after a long drought. He asks if I'm ready to see him. I always reply the same way. Not yet, but one day. It is not punishment. It is protection. For me, for him, and for the memory of the daughter who loved me without condition. I have spent the last month sorting through Claire's things, not to erase her, but to understand her again. Grief can take memories and fold them in strange shapes, making us forget the full picture. Going through her diaries, her photos, her letters, I remembered the softness in her handwriting, the optimism in her voice, the way she used to dance in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. I read her old notes, her dreams, her fears, and the gentle instructions she would leave on sticky notes for herself. She always wrote everything down. Even her feelings. That was Claire. Careful, thoughtful, tender. I found an entry dated a month before she died. "If anything ever happens to me, take care of Mom. She's all I have." I read that page 3 times before I could breathe again. Maybe that's why the phone rang. Maybe that's why the voice knew things only she knew. Maybe the world is kinder and stranger than we think. And maybe a daughter's love can travel farther than her body ever did. Whether it was her spirit, her memory, or simply my mind, reaching desperately for a warning, the message arrived exactly when I needed it. And because of that call, her trust stayed protected, her name stayed clean, and the future she planned wasn't stolen by greed. Some nights, I sit on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, listening to the quiet. I used to fear the silence. Now it feels like a friend. The wind moves through the trees in the yard, and sometimes I imagine it carrying her laughter, the way it used to echo when she ran around chasing fireflies as a little girl. I don't chase shadows anymore. I don't question every sound. I don't jump every time the phone buzzes. I have learned that fear shrinks when truth enters a room. I'm not the same woman I was before the call. I'm stronger. I'm clearer. I'm finally awake to the reality that love doesn't disappear. It simply changes shape. Sometimes it becomes memory. Sometimes it becomes protection. Sometimes it becomes a voice at midnight, reminding you that you're not as alone as you think. If someone asked me what the greatest lesson of all this was, I'd say this: the dead do not always stay silent, and the living do not always stay loyal. But truth, no matter how painful, always comes home. And as long as that phone stays quiet, I know my daughter is finally at peace, and now, at last, so am I.